Hey everyone, this is Matt Miofsky, pastor of The Gathering in St. Louis, and this is the Space Between podcast. Now, New Age is a term, a banner term we give to a whole host of spiritual practices that have kind of cropped up in the West, particularly in the United States in the 20th century and now in the 21st. And it includes all sorts of weird things that people are turning to find spiritual meaning. But you might be surprised to know there's actually congregations that help shape, support, and form people in those traditions. And this week I had the chance to sit down with Reverend Bill Duvendack. He is an astrologer, a Reiki energy specialist, and most importantly, he's the pastor of a New Age church right here in St. Louis. He's ordained in the Independent Spiritualist Church. He described himself as sort of a general practitioner of all things New Age. And this week, I had a chance to sit down with him. The conversation was weird, it was wild, but most importantly, he might have been the most hospitable religious leader I had the chance to interview. Well, Bill, thanks so much for taking some time just to sit down and talk about your church and more broadly the spiritualist or New Age tradition.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward.
So I'm just curious, how did you get into this? Did you grow up this way? Did you grow up with any faith? And then if so, how did you get into the spiritualist church?
It's a real journey of a hero kind of story because I was born and raised Roman Catholic. I even went to a Catholic grade school up until 8th grade, and part of that was even being an altar boy helping with Mass. Then I got confirmed at age 16. I left Catholicism because it just wasn't a good fit for me at the time. I went non-denominational Christian for about 2 to 4 years or so, until I came down to college. And then when I got down here in St. Louis to attend the university, I left the whole organized religion game entirely for approximately 10 years. And that was a lot of what you would expect in your 20s, a lot of soul searching, a lot of seeking what's out there, why are things not right from a spiritual perspective. And then I got introduced to spiritualism in 2005, but it wasn't the spiritualism that I knew about. You see, spiritualism started March 31st, 1848 in upstate New York, and it was solely about spirit contact. But the problem I had with it was, if these people have gone on, they've died, they're continuing their journey on the other side, then why should we want to call them back? That's like an ego stroke. And when I got introduced to Circle of Light, I was told that what separates it from regular spiritualism is the emphasis is not on contacting deceased relatives, but rather cultivating your relationship with your spirit guides and spirit teachers. So it was a different orientation. So it was a variant on a theme. And that was something I could get into because it was all about personal development.
So is it fair to say, I obviously in the Christian church, there's all sorts of denominations and groups that split up over some issue. I mean, is it fair to say that the same thing sort of exists in the spiritualist tradition? And it kind of along with that question, I use, New Age and spiritualist and independent spiritualist. Are all those terms cool? I mean, I know they probably all mean slightly different things.
They're all cool on the broad level of things. When we became a 501c3 in 2004, we were the only independent spiritualist church that I knew of and that any of us knew of in the Midwest. Now that it's 13 years later, there's more and more independent spiritualist church cropping up. So I'd say it's a growing trend and it's a growing movement. And what's interesting to me is that the way it is now, it's very much predicated on that idea that we've heard a million times, I'm spiritual but not religious. Mm-hmm. And I find that fascinating because I agree with you. I think that's going to be a continuing trend. So it's not necessarily because of infighting over dogma. It's more people are wanting to develop at their own pace and at their own tempo, which I fully support. The spiritual journey is a subjective and intimate one for each person.
So I'm curious, what is a because you gather for worship on Sunday morning.
Sunday nights. Actually.
Okay, Sunday nights. What does the service look like? How long is it? What do you do during it? Paint us a little bit of a picture.
Yeah, it lasts about an hour. We start off with quiet energy work for the first 15 minutes, and it's a time where people can come in and receive energy work from our certified healers. This can be the energetic system of Reiki or hands of light systems to get people the extra energetic oomph they need for what they're dealing with. We then start off with an opening prayer. We do the universal greeting, and from there we launch into prayers, current events. It's a community. We also go into the part of the service that is the most alien to a lot of people, because we have certified clairvoyants that are message bearers from spirit, and they bring through messages from their spirit guides and teachers to pass along people that are gathered here. From there, we go into a meditation. Generally, there's songs to raise the energy and the vibration, either for the message bearers themselves or at the end of the service, and then we follow it up with a fellowship. So from beginning to end, maybe an hour and a half total, but that includes the fellowship.
Yeah, and that's obviously an important part, is the community that people find here.
It is. We have a lot of fun with that. Actually, we had fellowship last night. And to let you know, the reason we meet on Sunday nights instead of Sunday mornings is because we have a lot of people that attend that also attend other church services in the morning. Okay. So they go there, and then they can come here in the evening.
So that brings me to a good question. Do you see this as complementary to other religious traditions like Christianity, or is it meant to be an either or? Actually,
we see it and like to promote it as very complementary, because one of the things that we discussed in seminary was the idea that if you look across the globe, the one common thread that goes back to the beginnings of all of them is communication with the spirit world. So spiritualism is simply codifying that in a more modern context. So we see what we're doing as 100% interfaith. There's no reason to turn away, say, a Muslim or a Christian or any other belief system out there like Thelema. There's no reason to turn them away, because we're all doing some sort of spirit relationship, even if it's just the spiritual relationship we have with our energetic self.
When I walked in, you handed me a yellow sheet that had beliefs and kind of principles and values for the community, and there was a lot on it, but I was just wondering, you said codified. What are some of the core beliefs in the spiritualist tradition? If you had to name a few that are kind of core non-negotiables, what would those be?
The first one that comes to mind is that just as much as we exist in the physical world, we exist in the energy world. So there is that foundational principle that everything physical has more or less an energetic other side to it. We are firm believers that the consciousness continues after death. And what's interesting to me is that quantum physics is starting to explore that more and more, and finding that there is a lot of truth in that idea. We do believe that there is a God, but that God is a universal term that we use for deity. So it is really about the subjective personal experience for each person and their link with divinity. Another tenet that is bedrock is the idea that it has been proven for a few hundred years now that you can have spirit contact. And that's something that probably catches, at least for me, the most flack, because the experiments that have been done that I usually cite are ones that are not accepted by mainstream science. So you kind of get into, is it scientific method, is it hard science, is it soft science, blah, 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 blah. But those are some key fundamentals that I would say are basically bedrock. A lot of other stuff is subjective. Like, for example, a lot of people that attend our services believe in reincarnation. But we believe it's an individual's choice whether or not they believe that. And if someone doesn't believe in reincarnation, they are just as welcome here as well as welcome to spiritualism.
Do you personally believe in reincarnation?
Yes, I do, without a fact. Or without a fact? Well, yeah, there's probably that too, because it's not tangible, but without doubt.
So there's a lot of freedom. I mean, it's safe to say it's not an overly dogmatic tradition, certainly, even though there's core beliefs. But along with that, I do get the sense that while it might not be overly dogmatic, it's very ritualistic, or at least there's a lot of practices it asks people to explore or engage in. What are some of, you named some of them, I suspect, in the worship as you went through the worship service, but what are some, how does one grow as a spiritualist?
So that's a real good question. And it's something that not a lot of people stop to think about. The way people grow through spiritualism is cultivating that relationship with spirit guides and spirit teachers. Now, one of the fundamental beliefs of spiritualism is that everybody has at least one master spirit guide that overlights their life. And it's that voice in your head that says, well, you shouldn't do that, and you don't do it, and then you realize you avoided an accident. So it very much coincides with the Christian idea of everybody having a guardian angel. So to grow in spiritualism, it's about establishing that rapport with that spirit, but it's also on doing your best every day. That's one thing that we like to emphasize is personal responsibility and personal accountability. So if you are not bettering your life with what you believe in, then it's time for some evaluation and some reassessment. One of the types of people that we get in worship quite a bit are people that come to us because we're dogma light.
Yeah, who are kind of walking away from overly dogmatic systems. Exactly. Which, of course, is a critique of Christianity oftentimes.
Generally, because it's the biggest, you know?
Yeah. Well, so here's kind of an ignorant question, but it must be kind of difficult having a bunch of people who are sort of running away from dogma into a place where their beliefs are more accepted. But because of that, you must just have people kind of all over the map believing a little bit of everything. And I walk in, there's a New Age store over in Maplewood by our church, and I walk in there and I'm just overwhelmed with, there's over here, there's energy things, over here, there's little statues, over here, there's so many, there's spices and incense and cards. And how do you herd so many cats and create something that feels unified? Is that a challenge to you, or do you just sort of...
It is a challenge. The good news is that the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none" can be really useful if you know enough about the smattering of the whole plethora that's out there. Then when someone brings you a question that's above your pay grade, as they say, you can easily refer them to the right place to get the info.
An expert in
exactly.
Whatever. Yeah,
exactly. So while most of us are at least passingly familiar with a lot of things, we also recognize where our boundaries of knowledge are. So it requires some discernment on our part of when to know to step back and say, you need to see someone who's far into this greater than I. So it also works to keep us humble.
Yeah.
You know?
Now you have to get kind of hassled by certain people. I don't know a lot about the spiritualist tradition and New Age traditions, but I know a lot about Christians, and they can be pretty judgmental to things like this for a lot of different reasons. And in general, there's got to be people who say, like, well, that's just weird, or I don't get it, or, do you get hassled about this? How do you deal with...
We have gotten hassled about it in the past, and without taking too much away from this platform, the hassling was by people who actually were looking for more of that dogmatic structure, and since we didn't have it, they didn't feel comfortable or they spoke up about it. Yeah. Luckily, doing what I do professionally, I don't encounter a lot of hassle. About the most I get is people say, oh, you're into that weird stuff. Yes, I am. Thank you. Well, and if we leave it at that,
people
then
say
it's
the same
a victory.
thing about Christians.
See, exactly. Well, and you bring up an important point. Anything that you've heard that's come your way about Christians, we've heard about us as much.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because that means it's a symptom of the human psyche. It's not tied to any one faith.
So what do you see as the challenges for your tradition? I mean, as a faith looking ahead, I'm assuming that like a lot of faiths, you are open, you're welcoming, you hope that it grows. What do you see as the challenges?
That's an interesting question, and I don't get it a lot. The first one is it's the classic fear of the unknown, fear of the other. Because we're doing something so radically different, people don't have an easy time relating to it.
Yeah.
Another situation, and this is one I'm sure you've encountered in some form, is that according to sociological research, attendance in churches across the boards is down. People are looking for a subjective personal relationship, and they're not as tied into things as they used to be.
Does that help you or does that hurt you as well? I mean, do you see the same decline that a lot of churches see?
Luckily, we're staying level right now,
okay,
which I'm glad to see. I expected a big drop off, but
it's not like people are leaving churches and all flooding into your place.
Exactly.
Either. They're kind of staying at home doing their own thing.
Exactly, and that's probably the biggest, if you could call it a threat, that's probably the biggest threat we have that you also face, is that more and more people are saying, well, I don't need this church and these people to tell me what to believe. I got this book and this is all I need, or I'm living a good life, so why seek for anything more?
Yeah, in my immediate sort of ignorance, I always think of kind of New Age as an umbrella term for people who leave organized religion and kind of piece together a personal spirituality that fits them.
Well, you're 100% correct.
Is that a fair? Yeah, is that fair?
That's exactly what it is.
And in some ways, even though you're in that stream of that New Age stream, you have the same challenge of convincing people that doing it in community is better than doing it alone, or something like that. Is that fair?
That's fair. We've got that issue, and the other issue that has not come up a lot recently, but for a while it was pretty common, was people leaving those faiths, coming here, and then bad talking the faith that they left. So we've had to stay.
We have a lot of that.
Yeah.
They don't like their last church, so they're going to come tell us all about it.
Exactly. So we've got to stay vigilant on that, because that's not why we're here. We're not here from an antinomianist perspective. We're here to celebrate the shared beliefs. So sometimes it's shaking people out of that mindset. It's like relationships. You have a bad relationship, then you judge future ones on the bad one, and yet you miss the beauty in the current one.
So when people come in, are there any? I mean, I know you have guidelines, you have principles. Is there like a holy book? I mean, something like the Bible or the Quran, or are there books or holy texts that you lift up as sort of more authoritative than other things?
It's actually funny that you mention that, because spiritualism is a religion that does not have one central holy book.
Which makes it unique, really.
Right. Exactly. And the way that we handle it here is whatever an individual's holy book is, then we honor that as being part of their spiritual path. So we have probably the majority of our congregation are Christian in some way, so they would say their holy book's the Bible. I can think of at least one or two people that their holy book was the Tao Te Ching. Another one I can think of off the top of my head, or her holy book, is the Bhagavad Gita. And when we get this situation...
You're like the religious version of a general practitioner, aren't you?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And as much as we laugh, that's very true. Yeah.
You have to know a little bit about everything.
Exactly.
Now, do you find it a challenge? People come in wanting to piece together their own thing. How do you avoid just a self-centered, narrow, selfish sort of religion that serves me but doesn't really serve anything outside of me? I mean, do you ever push back against that, or is it okay that people just kind of create whatever they want?
We try and find the middle ground. On one hand, there has to be some pushback. On the other hand, it's knowing that fine line of what you can cross and what you can't. So on that regard, this sounds horrible, but on that regard, it's reading people.
Yeah.
If you can see someone's really dug in and you're not going to make any ground, well, then don't push a bad situation. Be glad that they're doing something at all, because the world needs more of that.
Yeah.
But by that same token, if someone is throwing up arguments that are completely unfounded or based on ignorance or fear, then that's an opportunity to educate.
Yeah. Is there ever situations where you say, hey, you've just got to, I mean, we welcome all sorts of people and all sorts of beliefs, but that's just out of bounds and you got to move on. I mean,
we have had that
some people
throughout
that are
the
too
years.
weird even for you.
we have had that throughout the years. Yes. One thing we've noticed, though, because most of the active ministers now have been actively involved in the church for about the last 12 years. And one of the things we've noticed is a manifestation of the karmic law of attraction. If we keep our focus on doing the best and the brightest, we get fewer and fewer of those kind of people showing up at the door.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting how that works. So we stay focused on our fundamentals, on our principles. We stay focused on doing the best and the brightest, and usually, as years go on, knock on wood, we're not getting that as much as we used to.
I'm sort of curious. What are some of the myths maybe that, if you wanted to talk to a room full of Christians, what would you say? Maybe what are some of the myths about New Agers?
Well, and that's been going through my head since we set this up.
Yeah.
First of all, most New Agers, or most people that are into this, recognize Jesus the Christ as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, current teacher. They 100% believe in the tenets of compassion, of empathy, being kind to your neighbor, turning the other cheek, the golden rule. They are 100% in line with those Christian beliefs. What drives them away from that is dogma. So it's fascinating to me, because what it means is people are in mass are evolving to this perspective where I don't need somebody to tell me if I'm living a good life or not. My family's taken care of. I'm happy. My needs are met. I don't need anything past that. And I find that fascinating because in a lot of ways, it's a return to the roots of Christianity. You know, some people even go so far as to say Jesus was the first hippie. And I never argue him, you know, because he did preach that love and that tolerance. And the reason I mention it here is because oftentimes people think that New Age means like demonizing the old, and it doesn't. It means it's a quote from the poet Rumi, taking the pearl and leaving the shell behind. You take that wisdom with you and you incorporate it into new ways. Which means we're all in this rock together, so let's cooperate.
I love it.
That's where we're big fans of the idea of coexist.
Yeah.
The world's big enough for all of us to get along.
Well, this is fascinating. I mean, I could keep going on, but kind of the last question, and maybe it's a fitting place to end, is I think every religion, certainly Christianity, has a hope for people and for the world. How would you articulate, when it comes to the spiritualist tradition, what's your hope for people and then for the world or our life together?
Well, and you know what's funny is this shows how we're more similar than we are different, because we want the same things everybody else does. We want world peace. I mean, come on, kids. We want world peace. We also want religious openness and tolerance. Just because that works for you doesn't mean you have to decry another. We want more of a shift into what science can tell us. You know, we're moving forward into an age where science, and I'm sure you've seen this on the internet, science is becoming its own religion, which on one hand is good because more people are into science, but on the other hand, it's bad because science itself and scientific method of thinking means stepping back and not projecting. So it's kind of created an issue there, but we want world peace. We want people to understand that it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as it's bettering your quality of life overall and it's putting you in a position to be of service to others, then there's no problem with it.
Bill, I appreciate the time that you've given to me. And when we're done here with the podcast, I was hoping you'd share a prayer from your own tradition
Sure.
with me. And I want you to know, I'd love for you to come to the gathering sometime, especially and check out maybe even the weeks that we're talking about.
Well, I definitely want you to keep me posted on that, because I was thinking when we started setting this up, I would like to kind of see it live and in person.
Yeah, come
and be there for it, because
anytime.
it'd be a lot of fun.
Well, we'd love to have you. Well, Reverend Bill Duvendack, thank you so much for talking to us. And we really appreciate your time.
You were quite welcome. As far as a prayer goes, it's one that we use a lot here in service, and it's kind of a template or a generic one that can be filled in with whatever your intent is. Infinite order, ascended masters, guides, teachers, beings of light. We open our circle to you today that you may join us and share with us wisdom and insight to help us guide the next footstep on our path, so that we may bring greater light of clarity and love to the world, so that we may be guides for those whose paths we cross now and for the coming months. So mote it be.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Bill.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Hey, that was fun.
That was fun. I agree.
The Space Between podcast is hosted by me, Matt Miofsky. The show is produced by Jeff Allen, and our editor is Ben Bowers. Our theme song is 10,000 Feet by Jonathan Roy. For more information, visit gatheringnow.org.